Good day and welcome to the WANA Webinar Series. As you will notice, all participants have been muted. If you have a question to ask, please send your question into the Q&A panel located on the bottom right-hand side of your screen, or by pressing the three-dot option along the bottom and selecting the Q&A panel. Your question will be answered after the presentation. If you have any technical issues, please send a private chat to the host, the directions of which you can find in the chat window. Thank you for joining, and please welcome Joel Corcoran, Executive Director of Clubhouse International.
Hello and welcome to the WANA Webinar Series. Today's webinar is titled Celebrating Our Standards. I'm happy to be here with you and pleased that you are interested in hearing more about the international standards for Clubhouse programs and our processes. It is a favorite topic of mine, and I couldn't be happier than to be part of this panel of distinguished presenters. The International Standards for Clubhouse Programs is a document that is regularly improved and owned and created by the international Clubhouse community. It belongs to all of us and reflects our consensually developed idea of those things necessary to being a clubhouse. It both describes our clubhouses and it challenges all of us to be at our best. The standards for Clubhouse programs are the internationally agreed upon description for Clubhouse programs. It's a description of our model. Clubhouses everywhere around the world have continued to evolve. And since this document was created, it has also continued to evolve. And it reflects the current thinking about our Clubhouse International's community, about best practices and high expectations. The Clubhouse model continues to develop and improve over the years. The standards develop with the model. Today's Clubhouse in many ways looks different than the original model, but it remains anchored in the core values and principles expressed in our standards. Our standards describe a recovery-oriented community where people living with mental illness are involved not as patients in treatment, but as empowered members of a vital community that includes and engages each individual as a valued and whole person. The standards describe how we work together, offering respect and understanding, and to draw out the very best in people. They describe how we organize our system of unending opportunities to get involved, regain hope and confidence, build relationships, and to access work, school, and social networks. At Clubhouse International, we are charged with being the keepers of the standards. We are the keepers in that it is our role to coordinate and oversee the inclusive process that ensures that our standards remain a living document clarifying the philosophy and practice of the Clubhouse model. In doing so, we work to truly involve the members, staff, and board members everywhere who make up our Clubhouse International community. We work to involve you. People who participate in the daily work of the Clubhouse are the experts in what is meaningful and important. Therefore, we must always focus on your perspective and your experience when we consider to improve our standards. We manage a consensus building process for including all clubhouses in the discussion. You'll hear more about this in a few minutes from Lynn. Our standards serve as the foundation for the curriculum of our Clubhouse International training programs provided by 12 strong accredited clubhouses, our training bases. The standards are also the basis for the Clubhouse International Accreditation Program carried out by our faculty of more than 100 members and staff from clubhouses across the world. Over the years, the ideas expressed in our standards have also come to serve as a guide for community mental health agencies, government mental health officials, and advocates who wish to effectively assist people living with mental illness in their community by creating hope and recovery-oriented opportunities. There is no other program or service in the world that fully includes people with lived experience the way the Clubhouse model does. There is also no other training, quality assurance, or licensing program that has its system grounded in the partnership model like we have in the Clubhouse world. You know, even today, Clubhouse remains a radical and unconventional way of working. but it is clearly and surely an effective approach. The standards are at the center of that reality. It's wonderful to have all of you with us today and include you as part of the ongoing discussion about our standards and about how we improve our standards. We hope that you will hear and respond to the important message from us that your Clubhouse voice is needed in the effort to make sure that the standards are always relevant and that they truly reflect the most important aspects of the Clubhouse model. They are, in fact, your international standards for Clubhouse programs. Okay, the webinar will include several short presentations followed by a discussion and question and answer session. As you heard a minute ago, please use the Q&A section on your screen to ask questions. We will first hear from each of the presenters and then address as many questions as possible in the time remaining. Let me introduce the presenters. First, we'll hear from Robby Vorspan, Senior Program Officer with Clubhouse International. Robby will tell us from her firsthand experience about those days in 1988 and 1989 when the Fountain House training team led an inclusive and participatory effort amongst many Clubhouse programs to imagine and create the original edition of the standards. Then we'll hear from Lynn Lupo. Lynn is a member of the Independence Center in Missouri, USA. Lynn is a member of the Independence Center Board of Directors, and she is part of the Clubhouse International Standards Review Committee. Lynn will discuss the standards review process, which is the system for consensually and continuously improving the standards document. After Lynn, we'll hear from Jonah Bogle. Jonah is a member from Clubhouse Pelaren in Finland. He is on the board of directors there. He is also a member of the Clubhouse International Accreditation Faculty and serves on the board for Clubhouse Europe. Jonah will present about the impact of the standards on his Clubhouse and what they mean for him. And then after Jonah, we'll hear from our last speaker, Judy Meibach of Fountain House in New York. Judy is a member there and works as part of the Fountain House team in the Center for Leadership and Education. She will discuss a new standard study process and handbook that they are developing and offering from Fountain House. So let me turn it over to Robby now. Robby?
Hi everyone. I just had a thought when Joel was talking and, being with our whole Clubhouse community this way, I had this feeling like we're all gathered around to look at this incredible jewel that we all inherited together. And I'm like grandma, and I'm going to explain to you this jewel belongs to all of us and this belongs to our family. And this is how it came into our family. But I just had this incredible sense of these standards being something that connects us together as a community. So the standards, I just want to start before the standards. I want to go back a little bit to just the birth of the Clubhouse movement altogether. And everybody knows that, well, hopefully everybody knows that John Beard was the original visionary in the Clubhouse universe. He was the person who started Fountain House, the first executive director, and he was the one who, birthed the understanding, the basic understanding that people living with a mental illness need the same thing that anybody else needs, and they need to be contributing citizens of their community, and that they, have strengths and talents and abilities that far supersede their pathology. And that was the founding seed of Fountain House itself. And Fountain House operated by itself for many years, from 1948 until the mid-70s. And in the mid-70s, Fountain House got a grant to start replicating the Fountain House model. And at that point, another brilliant visionary sort of entered stage right. He was working at the Department of Mental Health in New York at the time, but he came to visit Fountain House, and it just, aligned totally with his understanding of humanity and mental illness. And he wanted to be involved. And he developed a connection with John Beard, because John Beard understood that Rudyard he was the person who had the vision for how to replicate this model. John understood what the model was, and Rudyard had a vision for how, because he understood that this was basic to human values, that this could work anywhere and should. So Nikki, if you could just put up the first picture, it's an old picture of Roger Probst, and you'll just see that beautiful smile. Like anybody who knows Roger just recognizes that warm, welcoming smile that usually went with the bear hug. Roger came to Fountain House, and his original job was to develop what we now know as the training program, the colleague training program. And as Joel was saying, he went straight to radical, because in those days there wasn't any such thing as a training team that involved members and staff, which he insisted that it did. And then he understood that the people coming for training had to be members and staff too, that was kind of harder to get through, because auspice agencies and people paying funding for those trainings didn't quite understand it, but Roger was adamant about it and made that happen. I joined Fountain House in 1983. Roger was hired in 1981, and he became the first director of training. Then I came and I worked for a year in the clerical unit, but I was fascinated by what was going on next door over in the training area. And Roger at that point was working with Mark Glickman, who many of you have read some of Mark's articles. Mark had been a member of Fountain House for many years and then was hired as staff. And then a small but like really committed group of members, some of whom you've heard of also because you've read some of their papers if you've been to colleague training, Jackie Peckoff and Michael Donahue and Cece Cooper and other people. So that group really kind of went on fire, because it was just an alignment of times, because even though the Fountain House had been doing training, we really hadn't started trying to articulate, well, what is this thing? Like, what is so different about this way of working than what many of us had experienced. Mark had been a member and had been hospitalized, and I was never a member, but I had a long history of being in and out of hospitals and other programs. And, Jackie and Michael and Cece, we all were able to like sit back and think like, what is it that makes this so different? And, like bounce it around and spin it around. And Roger was fascinated by that, and he really encouraged those discussions. So, there was a lot of electricity, a lot of, really stimulating conversations. And most of those started in the 4 o'clock wrap-up meetings that, if you've been to colleague training, you know what that is, where at the end of the day, the people in training come together and say, well, we saw this, and why is this, and why are staff cleaning toilets, or how come that staff person is covering a TE and there's no member there? Like, why are these things happening? And in those days, there were no standards, and there was no no place you could look up those answers, because nobody had really thought it through, like, well, why? So, we were really into trying to understand those things. And then now we're getting to the standards, I promised that we would. I remember the day in one of those 4 o'clock wrap-up meetings where you could almost visualize the light bulb going off behind Rudyard's head. That was because one of the colleagues was saying, it's too bad that the people from our agency can't ever really know what a clubhouse is unless they come here, because as we all know, it's magic. And the only way you could understand Clubhouse is to come to training and be immersed in it. And then you will, the force will be with you, and you will get the magic that way. And Roger's like scratching his head. He said, like, that can't be. He was all for magic. He totally got the magic, but he also was a really analytic and clear thinker. And he's like, if we're going to replicate this way of working, we need to say what it is clearly. We need to have a clear description of the core values. As Joel said, those values that will survive over time with evolution, that are like mining our values and what's at the base of this. So, everybody thought, that whole like training group thought, yes, let's go and do that. And then Ralph Bilby happened to walk into the discussion at that point. He was like, well, yes, of course, what we're looking for is a list of those things without which you are not a clubhouse. And that was like, yeah, that's what we're looking for. So the process that started creating the standards was we decided to identify 12 strong clubhouses that we knew because they'd been to training at Fountain House or we'd been to see them, and ask them to work with their clubhouse communities and just make a list of what they thought were those things without which you were not a clubhouse. And they did it, and they sent it back to us. Nikki, can you put up picture number 2? So this picture is a picture of the document that we got from Gateway House. That was one of the 12. And the reason we have this one in particular is because for some reason, their original list was closer to what eventually turned into the original standards than any of the other 12. You know, it's different than the standards, but basically everything that they included in there found its way in some way into the original version of the standards. And later we will put this document into the chat so you can download it and have it for your clubhouse. And attached to it is actually the very first version of the standards is there also, so you can have that. So we took those 12 and we invited people from 8 other strong clubhouses. And so a group of, I don't know, 20 or 30 people went up. Fountain House has a farm up in New Jersey, the High Point Farm. Some of you have been lucky enough to go up there. It has a lot of room. And this group went there for 3 days with the intention of taking all these documents and coming up with one document that was going to be an original draft of the standards. So there were like long days and long nights sitting out on the porches at High Point with big flip charts and magic markers and heated discussions and sparks flying. But, you know, the goal was each of the things that every one of those 12 had sent, like to discuss, is this essential? Is this a core value of Clubhouse? Is this the same as what they said over there from Genesis Club? You know, could these two go together? You know, and sort of creating lumps of ones that seemed like a lot of the 12 had said. And then in the end, taking all those clumps and trying to categorize them into like, okay, those seem like they have to do with relationships. And this bunch over here seems more related to like, how do you run your work order day? So then we ripped down all those flip charts and pages and clipped them all together and brought that all back to the training unit at Fountain House and spread them out all over the floor. And then a couple of us went around with, you know, just legal pads to try to write down, okay, number 1, this, you know, this could all be put together to say this. And, you know, it created like 35 points. So then they became the original draft of the 35 standards. Right about that same time, another one of, you know, Rudyard's brainstorms was to create the faculty for Clubhouse development. This was way before there was anything like accreditation, but the faculty were supposed to go visit clubhouses that had been to training and help them do better. So we took this first draft of the so-called standards and brought them to that group. It was like 45 or 50 people. So Nikki, if you could put up the third picture, this is a picture of Rudyard. Rudyard's over there in the left corner with the gray hair. And a lot of these people, you would recognize their names. Like Joel Corcoran is in there, and Phil Emery, and Mark Glickman, and Michael Donahue. These are the people who were in that original faculty and, you know, just discussing this original document there. And then the next step, and they took that and tore it to pieces and, you know, clarified it and added to it and helped it, strengthened it. And then we took that amended document to the 5th International Seminar that year was in St. Louis. And a lot of that seminar was given over to the standards. So it's, you know, it's very exciting for everybody who was there to sort of to help generate this first document that defined who we are as a community. And we had breakout groups and we assigned different sets of standards to different breakout groups. And they did amazing work there too. And so again, there was, you know, significant changes and clarifications to that. But at the end of that seminar, there was consensus that this document would go forward. But then we sent it out again to everybody who was listed at that time as a Clubhouse and Clubhouse directory to get any additional feedback, which there was some of. And then that became the first document, the first standards in 1989. And there's one more picture if you put up there's two more. Okay, this is the discussion at St. Louis. This is one of those sessions discussing the standards. And the left-hand corner there is Jackie Peckoff, for those of you who have read her Patienthood to Personhood in the training curriculum. And again, there's a lot of people in here whose names you would recognize, but you can see the energy that, this is exciting and this was ours. There was a sense of ownership about every word in it. And so then that became the first edition of the standards. And then, as Joel said, this document from the very beginning was meant to be an evolving, growing document. And so every other year at our international seminar, part of the standards review process is more of these discussions as proposals come in. And Lynn's going to talk about how to submit proposals. But this last picture is one of our most recent seminars. And every time there's a seminar, we have what we call a standards review hearing, where anybody at the seminar who wants to gathers together, and one by one, we review the proposals that have come in. And anybody in the audience you see this person with the microphone, you just come in, stand with the microphone and say, I support this proposal because I think this or this, or I'm totally against this proposal. And that's just part of the consensus building process. There's, it's not easy to change a standard, but we're all pleased with that because the standards are precious to us and we want changes to have, a tremendous amount of consensus. Okay, so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Lynn Lupo, who is on the Standards Review Committee, and she's going to talk more about the process of amending and updating our standards. Lynn?
Thank you, Robby. Welcome, everyone. I'm delighted to be here. As Joel said, I'm Lynn Lupo. I'm from Independence Center. I'm a member and on the board and on the Clubhouse Committee meeting.
Looks like Lynn might be having a little bit of a network issue. Jonah, are you ready if we jump to you quick?
Yes, we can do that. Yes.
Perfect, thank you.
So instead of Lynn, it's now Jonah Bogle is my name, and I'm a member of Klubbhuset Pelaren. I have been a member for more than 3 years of Klubbhuset Pelaren on the Åland Islands, which belongs to Finland, so forgive my accent. I arrived totally devastated at my Clubhouse community. I had recently moved from the mainland where my partner lived and had also just lost my job and had an episode at the local psychiatric clinic in Marienhamn. I was going on to sickness pension at the age of 37, and I thought my life had literally nothing more to offer. Little did I know when I agreed with my psychiatric nurse to try out Klubbhuset Pelaren that would fill me with a meaning, a cause, and give me my passion and life back. Shortly after my arrival, I became fascinated how things were working in this community. I got more and more engaged in meaningful tasks in and around my clubhouse. Quickly, I became intrigued by the international nature of the clubhouse community, and I got to know the standards. Then I really began to see that things were different here than in any therapy or psychiatric daycare center. I got the gist that everything is based on voluntary basis and that I decide myself how and in which pace I would like to recover. This voluntariness of membership at the Clubhouse, which is standard 1 of our international standards, made me take a closer look at them. When Lotta Eriksson, our former Clubhouse director and faculty member of Clubhouse International, returned to my Clubhouse community after a sickness leave, I eventually got more engaged in the standards. Whenever a situation comes up at our Clubhouse, which we are unsure about or have questions, we make sure that the standards are there as the basis of how we treat the issue and address a solution. We always consider them as they are standards of our basic values as a Clubhouse. Besides our regular standards discussion that is included once a week within our afternoon meeting, we have also a supervision which we adapted from the Norwegian clubhouses, in which we look closely at the standards. In this process, 2 staff members and 2 members meet once a week and discuss an issue or inquiry in relation to the international standards. The process is that everybody has the chance to talk a certain time without any comment from another participant. The order is that a member speaks, then a staff, then a member, then a staff, and so on. And then we open the discussion up to all. We make sure a record is kept of the discussion so our whole community can benefit with this supervision. Sometimes we also speak about the standards and their meaning and implementation in our house. These discussions are the highlight of my personal Clubhouse experience. We have quite a vibrant process to keep the standards alive and practical in our Clubhouse. The accreditation process throughout the years and their outcome proved our methods to be good, and we achieved only excellent results in the accreditation process. My personal engagement with the international standards started when I was chosen to make a presentation at the World Seminar in Lillestrøm, Norway in 2019, with my former colleague Lotta about creating a Clubhouse culture. I was literally overwhelmed by the international flair and the kindness of people at this conference. I felt like being a part of a revolution of mental health. Later, I was fortunate to meet Kinga Jedrzak, who told me about the learning exchange with Fountain House New York and gave me the contact of Judy Meibach, who you will hear later as a part of this webinar today. I joined a standard discussion group in collaboration with the learning exchange platform of Fountain House. There were, of course, different participants every time, but we had on both sides of the ocean a big group of people in this sophisticated exchange about the standards. These discussions were especially important for me, who is still relatively new to the Clubhouse world. It strengthened and deepened my understanding of the international standards. If you ask me today which standards are significant and make the most personal impact on me, for sure Standard 14 is the first that comes to my mind. Then I would be mentioning Standard 19 as central to my personal recovery story. Standard 14 says, as you all know, all Clubhouse space is member and staff accessible. There are no staff only or member only spaces. I know one would say this standard is quite easy and straightforward, but I remember we had the most thrilling discussion with Fountain House New York about this standard, and I understood the important one for me. Let me explain. There's a French philosopher named Michel Foucault who talks about the importance of space. He says that most public and institutional spaces are made to discipline the people in it and to establish a certain hierarchy and artificially maintain through disciplinary actions. Clubhouse space, on the other hand, according to the standard, is the opposite of this, and through its international social design, it is an important contribution to the Clubhouse model. The Clubhouse space is meant to promote equality, with no private spaces for either staff or members. This means that we can't hide from one another. Staff and members share power in a Clubhouse community and engage in genuine relationships with each other more than hierarchical ones. This also fights stigma and self-stigma. In a socially designed space like a clubhouse, it is not possible to follow a clinical model of treating people who suffer with mental illness like citizens with less worth, or to speak in codes and pretend members can't understand the therapy they are undergoing. Because of this standard 14, I believe we often can tell the difference between staff and members. Members are as knowledgeable, skilled, and educated as staff because we weren't born in mental wards, as my colleague Craig Beyer mentioned in his fabulous essay. If you take a closer look at your clubhouse, you will see Standard 14 works to promote your recovery and fight stigma. And then there's Standard 19, which says, all work in the clubhouse is designed to help members regain self-worth, purpose, and confidence. It is not intended to be job-specific training. I want to emphasize the word regain self-worth, purpose, and confidence. The word regain means we all once had self-worth, purpose, and confidence in what we are doing. All of the work in the clubhouse is designed to regain these. We had lives, careers, and dreams before. To engage in meaningful work, which serves our community directly and keeps it sustainable, is something very different than therapeutical groups which are inventing tasks to keep a patient busy and away from bad thoughts. Through meaningful tasks and side by side with staff or other members, we voluntarily commit to the sustainability of our working community. We make sure it will maintain a safe, equal, and respectful environment for all members. We grow through responsibility for the community confidence. We put as much work as we feel is necessary to maintain it. We want to make sure there will be a tomorrow for ourselves as individuals and for our clubhouse community. In the process of regaining self-worth, purpose, and confidence, we start to navigate again through our life with help of the many resources the Clubhouse community offers us in our personal recovery. All of the work we put into our community also serves our own well-being and recovery, our journey of navigation through life, and our empowerment to take control over these aspects. I have had help navigating my life from my Clubhouse community and from the standards. Over the last few years, I have become a board member of Klubbhuset Pelaren, a special advisor as expert by experience of the board of Clubhouse Europe, and finally, through my interest in the standards and how a Clubhouse can use them to guarantee the best possibilities for a member's recovery, I got accepted into the accreditation faculty of Clubhouse International. I celebrate the standards every day in my clubhouse. I defend them. I keep them alive and vibrant through mentioning them and discussing them with staff, other members, or board members. The standards are not only do's and don'ts, they are the very core of our values and connect us back to the history of Fountain House and therefore to the whole Clubhouse movement. As long as we hold tight to our standards and recognize them as our common ground, we can only grow stronger together. I would like to thank Judy, Meibach, from the Learning Exchange team of Fountain House New York for a wonderful journey through and with the standards. And I would like to thank my fellow co-workers from Klubbhuset Pelaren on the Åland Islands, Finland, for letting me represent them today. Now I would like to turn the presentation over to Judy Meibach of Fountain House, who will tell us more about their standard study project.
Let me just interrupt quick. So Judy, we're going to put a pause on you. We're going to jump back to Lynn. And Lynn, if you have any network issues, Joel's going to take over for you. After Lynn, we'll head over to Judy.
Good morning again. Nice to be here. It's been a struggle. Thank you for your patience. I have been part of the committee for the last 4 years, and I've been there. Could you go to the next slide? There are 8 members of the Clubhouse committee. I started about 4.5 years ago with Jennifer Higginbotham on the committee, and I'm sorry to say that she is currently doing other things with Independence Center, but I thank her for her support on this committee. The Standards Review Committee is made up of a cross-section of representatives from Clubhouse worldwide. The committee sends out a call for proposals to all the eligible clubhouses. They then send out the proposals approved by the committee through electronic communication to Clubhouses First, the biannual Clubhouse International World Seminar, the Faculty for Clubhouse Development, the Clubhouse Advisory Board, and the Faculty for International Training Base Group. This is what I will call the World Clubhouse community. This review process is monitored and tracked by the Standards Review Committee. It typically takes about 10 years. About 2 years, that'd be a long time. 2 years, and concludes with the publication of a new edition of the standards. Next slide. Oh, this is the wrong committee. This is the committee list. Joel Corcoran, Serge Blasberg, Tommy Gunn, Lisa Kessler, Chris Habel-Brosick, Eva Yao, myself, and Stephen Perley. Thank you so much for being for letting me be a part of the committee. Next slide. Every 2 years, Clubhouse International asks members clubhouses to review and discuss the Clubhouse standards and make proposals for improvements that can be disseminated throughout the Clubhouse International worldwide community, which I just mentioned in the earlier slide. Next slide. The standards serve as a Bill of Rights for members and a code of ethics for staff, board, and administrators. The standards insist that a clubhouse is a place that offers respect and opportunity to its members. Joel and Jonah have both talked about how important the standards can be. At the heart of Clubhouse is helping people with mental illness to stay out of the hospital while achieving social, financial, educational, and vocational goals. Next slide. Using the consensus building process, which Joel's mentioned, the Standards Review Committee considers all proposals and related responses from clubhouses before adopting recommended new or revised standards. These proposals are consensually agreed on by the worldwide Clubhouse community, which I've mentioned before again, to define the Clubhouse model of rehabilitation. Next slide. Process of reviewing standards. The committee encourages ongoing review of the standards by colleagues everywhere. The Standards Review Committee provides a structural method for review with clearly defined rules designed to be user-friendly and understandable. We'll talk about that further. By continually discussing the standards, we prevent them from becoming static and irrelevant. Jonah talked about how they're an evolving document. The committee requests proposals that seek to improve the functioning and impact of clubhouses everywhere. We understand that the unique needs of people living with mental illness exists in a world that is ever changing. Therefore, our standards will always need to be considered and improved. This is particularly important to these days, the timing of the review process with the coronavirus. It helps frequently clubhouses will be looking to see how to respond to the COVID according to maybe suggestions or inspiration or guidance from the standards during this time. We encourage all clubhouses to accept this responsibility with a high level of sincerity and seriousness to submit proposals that meet our criteria. In addition, it is important that proposals must be submitted in the format required by the Standards Review Committee. Next slide. In order to be included as a qualified proposal in the Clubhouse International Standards Review process, a proposal must meet these 3 basic criteria. They're very broad and they're meant to be broad, but they can also be, they can be specific also. The first one is universality of concern for the Clubhouse International community. That's the first one. The second one is general applicability to all clubhouses. C is consistency with Clubhouse values and principles. Next slide. Here, not only does it have to meet that criteria, but it has to be in the correct format. And I believe they may be having a copy of this on the chat at a later time, but I'll go briefly through this format example. What one needs to do in the right off the first bat is to mention the standard that they're proposing and how it currently reads. You can see how the standard is worded there under how it currently reads as it is in the standards now. Then you would add the proposed change with the changes highlighted in bold so that they can be easily identified. Then there is a rationale for the change. They have 3 steps, 3 phases here that they've took 3 rationale on this standard. Not only do they have to meet this format, but just as an aside, the Clubhouse standard is evaluated as it is written in the proposed change. If the proposed change reads a certain way and the ideas and the thought is that with a different word or words that may be it may be more acceptable, we cannot at that time work with any difference in what the actual proposal is. I hope that's clear. It just basically it means that the exact way that it is written is exactly how we will decide if it is eligible or not for forwarding the proposal onward. Next slide. These are some common mistakes to avoid. The proposal does not follow the format, which we've talked about. The proposal is not applicable to all countries and cultures. The proposal is too lengthy and prescriptive in requirements. The proposal uses languages that is unclear, vague, or has various interpretations. The proposal is not related to a topic of concern for most clubhouses. And in this, I think the language is very important, especially since we have a large worldwide clubhouse community where language can make a big difference in people's interpretation of the standards. Continuing the process, after determining that a proposals meet all of the criteria that we've mentioned before, the Standards Review Committee circulates the proposal throughout the aforementioned Clubhouse International community and seeks feedback in support or in opposition to each standard. The Standard Review Committee collects all responses and determines if there is a consensus in support of making the proposed change. Next slide. We do have this year a recent modification to this process, which takes place when there are several proposals regarding the same standard. Say you have 5 proposals for standard 5. When this happens, the Standards Review Committee will ask the affected clubhouses to try to coordinate and submit a single proposal. That's different than we've been doing before. As I said, we just had to rule on whether it was written exactly correctly to be approved or disapproved. Again, with this new change, it will help to maybe make it more efficient process for for consideration. Standards proposals are being accepted for consideration this year until July 1st, 2021. All clubhouses in the Clubhouse International directory have been invited to submit standard proposals for consideration. All proposals that meet the stated criteria will be distributed to the Clubhouse community as written, again, the exact language, for consideration and comment. Last slide. The proposals that receive widespread support are included in the next published edition of the International Standards for Clubhouse Programs. These changes to the International Standards for Clubhouse Programs are the basis, as Joel has talked about, of all the Clubhouse International approved training programs and the Clubhouse International credentialing process, which Robby also talked about. So that's it. I hope it's been helpful. Look forward if you have any questions. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Lynn. All right, there's an updated link in the chat section for the documents. Now we're going to head over to Judy.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead, Judy.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. My name is Judy Meibach, and I'm a member of Fountain House, New York. And, you know, we've talked about the standards today, and what we realize is that the standards are the secret sauce that we talk about, the magic that, you know, so many of our predecessors have alluded to. So if we don't know where we come from, we don't know where we can go to. So we've tried to embellish on what we've done and go forward through the learning exchange to teach the standards to a whole new generation of people, a whole new generation of members and staff. What we've done, we started the team, Craig Bayer, Noel Hanrahan, Lou Widoff, Michael Hamlin, Serge Blasberg, and I have started a number of years ago, where we met with other clubhouses, and we would meet on a weekly basis and discuss the standard. We would pick a standard and discuss relevant questions and other relevant questions and relevant scintillating discussion. You know, coming from different clubhouses, there's different perspective that you have from the different clubhouses. We've met with clubhouses from Indiana, Iowa, Massachusetts, Cleveland, and then we've met it with Europe, with Oslo, and with England, and we're continuing to meet with other clubhouses too. We had the opportunity to discuss different things, and we pick questions, and we would go over a period of about 10 weeks and discuss how people would respond. I mean, my personal favorite standard, which we started our procedure with, was membership is voluntary and without time limits. I think that that's the core of our program, that we can, that as opposed to another psychiatric program, there's a voluntary nature to the program, and we do this because we want to be there. We want to be part of the process. We want to be part of the movement. This past year, during the pandemic, we decided we wanted to embellish on this. So we created a manual, and we wanted to formalize our discussions. So we went through and we created a format of meeting 10 weeks. The first 5 weeks would be one side of the team, and the second 5 weeks would be this other side of the team, and we would come up with a discussion of a particular standard and 3 relevant questions. The standards, what we've noticed is that the standard studies aim to create and replicate spaces where greater understanding of Clubhouse practices can elucidate. It's amazing what, membership is voluntary and without time limits, the wide variety of discussion that can come out of it. There's a cultural difference. There's a, that's even within the United States, from state to state to state, from clubhouse to clubhouse to clubhouse, there's a difference in perception and perspective, and it reflects that. One of the biggest things that I found from the the biggest things that I found from the discussions is the relationships that have been formed. Isolation is an impediment to mental illness, and it holds us back, and we feel like we're not part of a community. By being part of this standard study community, we've developed relationships. One of the relationships I'd like to speak most specifically about is, of course, the relationship I had with Juergen, Jonah. We met and we had a series of discussions, and then we developed an online relationship. The other relationship that I had was with David Malatesta from Oslo Clubhouse. He facilitated the meeting with the Futtenhaus Oslo, which we had over a period of 10 weeks, where we had a series of 10 members on their side and 10 members on our side, and we would discuss the standards. After that, we got to know each other over a course of weeks, and it was a relationship building. Relationship building is so significant to the formulation of the club, how the clubhouse work, and the secret sauce of the clubhouse. That ultimately David came to New York to visit both Craig and myself, and then go out to dinner with us, and that was a wonderful experience. I think using the vehicle of the standards, where we have a common discussion on what we're talking about, is an opportunity to elucidate discussion and conversation and relationships, and a way of expanding the movement and expanding the program. It sounds a little bit, a little funky. It sounds a little weird, but that's what the magic of the program is. That, by meeting people of like minds, even if they're in Finland or in Oslo or in England or in Cleveland, we have common knowledge, and then we can go, and if we want to expand on it, we can change the standards if we feel that we have something that we have, as Lynn mentioned, something positive that we want to embellish on it and to elucidate on it. So I'm very appreciative to this. We started this final rollout of our program this year, where we worked with one of our other units, and we had a 10-week this co-discussion between two units, which was facilitated by one of our staff members, Noel Hanrahan, and our learning exchange team of Craig Bayer, Michael Hamlin, myself, and Serge Blasberg. And we discussed the way we can expand on the standards and the relevance of them, and how we can move forward with it. The standards are always evolving, and as I said, if we don't know where we came from, we don't know where we're going to. And there's an evolution. It's a circular thing, and we can only move forward from where we came from, because the standards have come a long way since 30 years ago. Thank you very much for allowing me to speak.
Thank you very much, Judy. Joel, did you have something you wanted to say before Q&A?
Yes, thank you to all the presenters. Thank you, Judy, for that. It's exciting to hear about a new process available to clubhouses to enhance the discussion about standards in our community. You know, it just is a great addition to the training discussions, the teach manual that Grand Avenue Club makes available to clubhouses, standard of the day discussions. It sounds like this process is more in depth, very interactive, and it certainly seems to, from the people who have either you put up on a screen or yourself, Judy, it seems to be really an enriching process that people find very, very valuable. So it's nice to have that addition. Um, I want to highlight something Lynn said, that the standards review process is underway for the 2021 and 2022 process. We have written to every clubhouse director and sent the format and the process for the call for proposal and the format for the process. If your director hasn't talked to you about that yet, please ask them about that. Contact Clubhouse International if you want us to send it again to you. We'll probably send it out a couple more times anyway, but July 1st of this year is the deadline for proposals to be considered in this round. And we hope that all of you will participate because your voice is incredibly important to us. And last, I want to highlight that question that Ralph Bilby and the training team at Fountain House asked so early on, which is, what are those things that without which we would not have a clubhouse? Okay, Nikki.
Perfect. Thank you, Joel. For those that have a question they would like to ask, please submit your question in the Q&A panel located in the bottom right-hand side of your screen or by pressing the three-dot option along the bottom and selecting Q&A panel. Our first question for today is, the standards are in English and have been translated into other languages. What translation problems have you seen?
Oh, that's a fascinating question. Yes, you can find the standards translated into many different languages on our website. When typically the translation is being done by members in class of, and members and staff of clubhouses worldwide. So we're pretty confident in the translation in that they capture the meaning and the nuances around culture and language. But probably the one challenge that we've had is finding people who are able to do those translations on a regular basis that can in fact capture the cultural differences associated with some words or phrases. For example, there's for example, a standard that requires clubhouses to be open and celebrate holidays on the actual days there are holidays. For a while that was a challenge for us in the training and accreditation program when we talked with many Scandinavian clubhouses, because many didn't have their Christmas celebration on Christmas Day. But in fact, it turns out that in many Scandinavian societies, the big celebration for Christmas is on the day before. And so, we had to adjust our accreditation process to that. And I think that the specific language that calls on clubhouses to have it on the actual day, to celebrate the holiday on the actual day in which it falls, there is a cultural difference there. So we have to take that into consideration. And we have to recognize that sometimes the specific language that's written in English doesn't communicate, it doesn't translate exactly. So we rely on our clubhouse members and staff, people who understand Clubhouse, to make those translations for us.
Wonderful. All right, our next question. What was the first standard ever concretely developed? Why was the standard so paramount?
Robby, do you want to take that on?
Well, I don't know that there was one standard that was developed before the rest, because as I said, we asked these 12 strong clubhouses to send their list of those things without which they were not a clubhouse. So it wasn't one at a time. But I don't think it's accidental that the one that Judy mentioned is number one. And that one, I think everybody agreed on that right off the bat, that had to be the head of the list, that the clubhouse is voluntary. So yeah, there wasn't a first standard, but that one is number one for a reason, probably.
All right. And we're only going to have one more question. We had a lot of important information in this one, so our questions are a little short today. But our last question, what would you say is a thread weaving through the standards? What binds them all together?
Well, that's an interesting question. Judy or Lynn or Jonah, do you want to take a shot at that? I have an answer, but I'd like to hear from one of you.
I would say the relationships that we develop are pretty much goes throughout the course of the standards that bind it all together. How we react or respond to each other and the ways that we do is one connecting theme. Jonah, did you have something?
I support that idea. Basically, I think that's very relevant what you just said. Absolutely, yes.
Anybody else?
I agree also. I think, but I also think, because I did quote the first standard, I think all the standards fall back to the voluntary nature of the clubhouse, and the fact that we are involved in this by our own volition and not being forced to do this means that we want to do the things that are part of the Bill of Rights, as was mentioned, that we want to be part of this. We're not being forced to do something. And so I think that that's one of the threads, not the only thread, but one of the threads.
You know, I would add to wrap up that I think a thread that runs throughout the standards is that that it's important to recognize that the people who participate in clubhouses, clubhouse members, have something to contribute to a restorative community. And if we engage, involve, and see people as valuable and whole people, see the whole person, that we in fact can create a community that engages people who might otherwise be left out, and that by focusing on by focusing and empowering people to be part of the leadership, management, visioning, and day-to-day process of the clubhouse, which also provides them help, that we greatly expand the potential.
All right. Thank you, Joel. All right. So if we have not answered your question, please send an email to wanawebinar@fountainhouse.org. The presentations and all documents for today's session will be sent directly to everyone in attendance, and the recording will be made available next week. There will be a survey on screen once the event ends. Please take a moment to fill it out and give us your feedback. Thank you for coming to the webinar, and please be on the lookout for announcements regarding our future webinars.